I'm Heidi and I'm codependent. And I'm excited to be here. And shame is my favorite topic. I'll probably say that about other topics too, but it feels like shame is underneath my codependence in every aspect. This material that I'm presenting today is like the closest to, I mean, it's what made a huge difference in my recovery. I'm going to share a lot about my journey. I'm going to share a lot about my crazy shit. So brace yourself. Like the more work that I kept doing on my recovery, the more clear it became that I didn't understand shame and I didn't understand the role that it played. I kept on hearing about there's this thing called shame. It's that yucky feeling that you have inside. It's like typically you can identify shame when you feel less than, or you feel afraid of what other people think about you. I could identify it with the shame spiral for sure. That I hate myself. I'm curled up in a ball. My life is a wreck. Nothing works. I mean, that's what my head is saying. The shame messages are like, nothing that I'm doing is helping. I keep ending up back here. Like basically I just feel hopeless and lost and like, oh, that's shame. Okay, I get that. What I didn't understand is how I was managing it, or rather mismanaging it, and how I was actually protecting it and keeping it alive and kind of nurturing it in the background instead of ever healing it. And that's what I'm going to talk about today is, more about how to stop, for me, what my journey brought me to around how to stop protecting the shame and start healing the shame. Because I could escape it for a while and then I'd always end up back in a shame spiral going, well, shit, how'd I get here again? You think you're doing good for a while and you're on top of things and things are good. And then bam, another shame spiral, I don't know, maybe it's just me. but that, it was like, what am I missing? And this is what I found for me was the answer to that, is what I'm doing in between shame spirals that are leading me to another shame spiral. And so that's really the essence of what I hope to be able to, share. I'm gonna start out by just really briefly going over my story, which is hard for me to condense it down, but I'm gonna try. So I was raised by codependent addicts. I'll give you a snapshot of what my home life was like. And I believe that's what bred the codependence within me and created the codependence, was, just strategies for surviving shame, basically. And so both my parents come from really wounded childhoods, lots of abuse, lots of abandonment. My mom was molested. There was lots of religiosity in her childhood, lots of conditional love, lots of military wounds, going back on both sides of the family, losses, injuries that impacted people, that impacted fathers, that, abandonment that impacted mothers, So my lineage on both sides is very affected by military wounds, my dad's side of the family. Both sides of the family had broken homes, so for my parents to cope, my dad is an alcoholic. sex addict, rageaholic. Um, how do you say, like, addicted to philosophy and intellectualizing and okay, narcissistic. Okay, we'll go with that. And and my mom was very people pleasing, fix everybody, a lot of religious addiction there. She raised me and my sister's Mormon, and there was a lot of fantasy built into that, and also a lot of terror, like a very terrifying, um, scenario of heaven and hell and conditional love and everything's perfect over here, but if you slip once, you're going to burn for eternity kind of shit, you know? So my parents were self-employed and entrepreneurs, and a lot of that led to them having their own business, working together 24 hours a day. They became super enmeshed with each other, and their love addiction and sex addiction and co-sex addiction with each other, and fantasy entrepreneurship was just like this crazy home life to grow up in. And you know, what I know is that from the time I can remember, I was always trying to be perfect. I was always trying to make everybody happy. I was always trying to fix my mom's deep sadness and unhappiness. And I was always trying to keep dad from getting mad. And that was really what I tiptoed around all the time, was trying to make mom want to live and make dad not rage. And I was convinced that if I did it right, I could do that. I really thought I had the power to do that. And probably because of the shaming messages that I got, that it was my fault when mom wanted to die, and it was my fault when dad raged and you know, beat us and stuff. And so out of that message came the, well, if it's my fault, then I can do something about it, right? You know, well, I didn't know I couldn't. I didn't know it wasn't my fault, and I didn't know that I couldn't do anything about it. I didn't know that I had parents that were out of control, and they you know, they seemed competent enough to me, you know. I just blamed myself and my 4 sisters. There was 5 of us. And so that became my childhood obsession, was trying to be a good girl. And that was the fantasy that drove me pretty much my whole childhood. Trying to be perfect, have the right smile on my face, have the right pants size, clean my room right, make my sisters obedient, motivate them. I mean, things that were completely out of my power, you know, like anticipate dad's mood and offer him a beer, you know, when it was like the perfect moment to offer him a beer to make him happy. Or, you know, usually what I got raged about or shamed for was being selfish, being insensitive, not doing what I was told, not doing my part. You know, the shame messages were, I'm greedy, I'm selfish, I don't care, I don't know how to love anyone but myself. Of course, there wasn't any self-love going on, you know. Neglect isn't self-love, you know. So all that just built this obsession within me to fix myself, just to fix myself, to be a better person, you know, to be enough, to be okay, to make it right, you know. And I always felt like the world was on my shoulders. And so much of what was going on, like my parents' business and, you know, the world at large, and all my family members, and, you know, I just obsessed and obsessed and obsessed about it. And I just took it all on, like it was all my fault and that I was supposed to be able to figure it out, and that's just what I continuously did, is try to figure it out. And I would make a plan, to be perfect. And that would kick me along for a while. It would make me feel like I was safe. It would give me a false sense of safety. I was never safe with parents like that. And make me feel like I was, in control of something. It fixed the fear of just living with people that were randomly, destructively abusive, and ultimately, like, I could get backhanded any minute and never knew it. I remember one time that my mom's mom and dad came over to our house, and my grandma lit up a cigarette, and my dad had quit smoking, so he didn't smoke since I was like 3 or something. And so I barely remember him smoking, but and this was in the 70s. Smoking was still really popular, and I asked my grandma, oh so innocently, I was probably like 6 or 7. And I asked her very innocently, like, why do you smoke? Like, I didn't understand. All I had been told is that if you smoke, you'll go to hell. Because that's what Mormons think. I don't know if that's what's Mormon. That's not fair to say, but that's what I was taught, that Mormons don't smoke, and that if you break the rules, you'll go to hell. So that's a rule you don't break, and that it's bad for you, it's bad for your lungs. And I was also told that, like, it hurts to smoke, and I knew it's stinky, so I didn't understand. So I just very innocently asked my grandma, why do you smoke? And my mom said, get over here. And I was like, okay. So I walked over to my mom, and she smacked me across the face. Don't you be disrespectful, go to your room. And I had no idea what just happened. No idea. I was completely, confused, publicly humiliated, ashamed, sent away. I had no idea what I did wrong, but I knew never to do it again. Whatever my little girl inside made up about that moment, I was never going to do it again. So what did I learn out of that? I learned, don't ask questions. Don't inquire. Don't make things your business. Don't question people's, I wouldn't have known what to call it then, but don't question people's right or wrongness is probably how I felt about it at the time. And underneath all that is, don't trigger mom and dad's shame. But how does a child understand how to do that? I don't know that that's my mom. I triggered my mom's shame, and that she raged at me because she was super embarrassed in front of her mother because of whatever their shame dynamic was, But that's an example. And my mom was the nice one. It's the sad part. Oh God. My mom was the gentle one of the two of them. But when her shame got triggered, she was overtly abusive, And, so we got spanked a lot. We got backhanded a lot. We got the belt a lot. There was a lot of the belt. There was a lot of the hairbrush. There was a lot of the switch. There was a go get me a branch off the whatever tree from the backyard, My parents believed in physical abuse, or they believed in physical discipline. They thought that would make a difference. I truly understand today that they thought that was being a good parent. But a lot of the discipline was just done off the hip from a place of shame triggers, and I know they felt guilty and ashamed. I understand now they would have a shame spiral later about it, when they would do it flippantly like that. And, I remember getting talks when I was a kid, well, you just need to whatever, and, I'm just trying to teach you. And, I can see now that they were wrestling with their own conscience about it. And trying to make sense of their reactivity and justify to themselves, because they felt ashamed, they felt guilty, they realized that they overreacted, that they, I mean, here I am, like, I'm crying so hard I can't even breathe. And my parents loved me. It wasn't like they didn't love me. They just had a shit ton of shame and no tools to parent out of that. So anyway, that was childhood, and then it got worse. My dad started molesting me when I was 13, and that lasted until I was 19. And my mom co-signed it when she found out when I was 16 and left me with him. And the story was, dad groomed me to believe that he was in love with me, that we were soulmates, that God had switched me and my mother's souls or I mean, he just made up a crazy fantasy that I bought into over time. And when dad started treating me nice, I was a sucker for it. I was so hungry for my dad's love and attention. And it was a train I didn't see coming, for sure. And so he lured me in with being his favorite, when I was probably like 11, 12. And then eventually he just kept pushing the boundary and pushing the boundary and pushing the boundary. And then eventually the emotional enmeshment, turned into sexual, he just kept feeding little pieces at a time. And eventually, like, I had I already was so comfortable with self-abandonment by that age. I already, like, lived a life outside of myself. I already had developed all the skills of codependence to be able to deny my needs and wants, deny my feelings, choke down my sobs, put a smile on that wasn't authentic, make everybody else matter except me, and just cram myself into some tiny little box somewhere in the background where I'm not even real. This world is real, and what you think is real, and who you want me to be is real. And here's the little mask of Heidi. And so the molest just kind of fit right into that. So I wasn't able to get out of that until I was 19. And what helped me to escape was a love addicted fantasy about a boy that came into my life that actually worked for the family business, and he ended up being my first husband. And sad to say it, but it was that the love addiction and the fantasy about him that was the reason that I was able to finally tell my dad enough and leave and run away. And that's what I did when I was 19. So, addiction saved my life in a way, but in the meantime, a lot of damage was done. I still am healing my sexual shame around my dad's molest. There was plenty of sexual shame before the molest began. I can't go into all of it. There's so much there, but and my mom left me, that I don't know which is more painful, my dad's molesting me or my mother leaving me, I can feel that right now, just saying that out loud. Thank you guys for hearing that. And my coping strategy was, a shit ton of alcohol. My dad got me hooked on alcohol by the time I was 14. A workaholic. I was a devout workaholic. Dropped out of high school, beginning of my sophomore year, to work in the family business. People pleasing, fantasy was huge for me. Perfectionism was huge for me. And then, I carried all that shit into my adult life, for sure. And added rage. I didn't have rage when I was being molested by my dad or when I was in my family, because it wasn't safe to be angry around my parents. It would have got me killed. But after I left, in my adult life, I became the rager in all my relationships. I generally find people that do rage in other ways, or I do their rage. Um, so, so when I got away, I thought that I would be happy now. I had this guy that loved me. Who would have ever thought that could happen? I never did. I totally never thought that anyone would ever want to be with me. And he was, he was in love with me, and we were going to build a life together, and all my PTSD started coming out, and I was just a train wreck. So um, I again, I'm just gonna have to breeze through this stuff, but I got I turned my dad into the police. Yay me. It saved my younger sisters from having to go through it. I started counseling when I was 20. Again, yay me. I kept on drinking. Not so yay. Not so yay. And so as I'm doing counseling, I'm not really getting the healing benefits. I'm learning lots of stuff, but so's my addict, right? And so whatever recovery I'm getting is kind of getting implemented into my disease, and I'm sitting there kind of juggling my my addiction, and my the things that I'm learning and the healing that I'm doing, and I'm learning how to feel, and I'm facing all my memories and trying to put the pieces together of what the F happened to me. And but I'm medicating with a lot of alcohol at the same time, so it wasn't as beneficial as, let's say, it could have been. So fast forward a few years, and I have a son, my first son, Steven, well, my only son. And and now I have this addiction to being the perfect mom, and I'm not going to do anything that my parents did. I'm going to do it all right, and he's going to be so happy and healthy and perfect and sweet and wonderful and nice, and he'll love me so much. And oh my God, that poor kid. What a burden. What a legacy for that poor kid. And thank God I did have some counseling under my belt. I read some Bradshaw. I did some therapy groups, and I had some better knowledge than my parents did, for sure. But I had no idea about codependency in the regard of, like, the pressure I was putting on this kid to fix all my childhood shame. Maybe not all of it, but a lot of it. And that, it just became one more thing for me to be perfect at. And then when he was a child, because he was a child, so whenever he would show up as a kid and ruin my fantasy of being the perfect mom, then I would rage at him. I would withdraw my love. I would go into a shame spiral. What's wrong with me? Why can't I do it right? What's wrong with you? Why can't you do it right? And so I carried forward those patterns into that parenting, and of course did the same cycle with my husband at the time. And life was messy, and I went to college. Okay, that's what I need. That'll fix me. There's the new plan. That's that, like, oh, this will solve everything. And I graduated with a 4.0, and just little Miss Diligent, proved to the world and proved to myself somehow. And and I just didn't even know I was just managing shame. I'm just one more way of managing shame. None of that fixed it. So anyway, when I was 27, I filed for divorce, and started doing meth. Probably not my better choices. And started, I gave up on therapy and said, oh, I'm just going to be normal. And then instead of being normal, I just completely dove off the deep end. And my childhood shit caught up with me, and I couldn't stay out of the bars. I was sleeping with strange men. All the co-sex addiction stuff came out. All that sexual shame, just acting it out like crazy. And, you know, and I had this justification of like, I missed out on my childhood because my dad molested me. So now I'm just kind of making up for lost time. Well, no, I wasn't. That was horseshit. I was flushing my life down the toilet, putting my life in danger, hanging out with creepy people, totally in self-abandonment, and reliving my abuse with abusive people. It was insane. So I hit bottom when I was 29, and got into Narcotics Anonymous. And NA saved my life. And I've been clean for 20 years now. I'm 50. I just turned 50. And and you know, it was a miracle. I can't even describe what a miracle it was. I finally felt like I found my people. You guys understood me. You know, I mean, people in recovery are working on themselves. I was always habitually working on myself. um, People understood where I had come from. There was tons of people that had broken childhoods, just like I did. You know, lots of people that understood. You know, we were all talking about it. You know, I was able to heal a lot of my spirituality shame. I found the steps and I diligently worked them. I loved that. I plugged into my first sponsor like she was my mother. Not really the healthiest relationship, but it did save my life and got my ass busy working steps, you know, and calling her. And I was a good little sponsee. And, you know, and I thank God for NA because it saved my life. Absolutely. And fast forward a few more years, and I found myself in a love addicted relationship with a man that I met doing drugs, actually. And he got clean after I did. And it was a miracle. Oh my God, this was meant to be now. And it was like, you know, and so I made up a huge fantasy about that because I'm a big fantasy addict. And, you know, we got married and had a big NA wedding, and it was amazing, and had a daughter. And a couple years into that, so I had 8 years clean. And he started doing some deeper work on himself, and it all came out that he was a sex addict, and that he had been cheating on me for the entire relationship. And I was devastated, and I hit a brand new bottom. It was like the, you know, the lowest I had ever felt, I think, in my life. And certainly worse things had happened to me, but I didn't have enough. I didn't have enough. I wasn't available for them. I had enough recovery through this bottom to feel it because I wasn't using drugs, you know. And so it was the worst I'd ever felt. And I wanted to die. I wanted to kill myself. My whole fantasy of this amazing NA life that I had with this miracle man and our miracle family and whatever was just completely shattered. And you guys, that's how I got to Coda. I've been here for 12 years now. And that withdrawal from love addiction and the fantasy addiction around that relationship took me like a good 3 years before I was able to, I don't even want to say it, but before I could feel happiness, you know, before I felt like, before I felt like I was okay. That bottom was devastating. And you know, and it's because that addiction, that fantasy addiction, went all the way back to fixed shame that started as a very little girl plugged into my parents' relationship and our childhood fantasy, the family fantasy that I had built around who we were as a family, and mom and dad's chaotic relationship with each other, and how mom was always trying to get dad to get baptized, you know, in the church, because then that would change his heart. And, you know, I mean, just all of those stories that were made up to fix that incredible shame that I was carrying. So I was stuck in it and had to feel it. And, you know, I worked the steps 3 times in my first year in Coda because I was sure that if I worked hard enough that I could fix it. and I couldn't. It, you know, I could sit down and write, and all that was certainly good effort on my part. But it just took what it took, you know, and I just had to keep coming back, and I just had to keep on surrendering it and surrendering it and surrendering it, and change my thinking that I could fix it, you know, and let a higher power in. And I, you know, I knew what the steps were about. I just didn't know this level of surrender that I needed to have to do these layers of work. I could, you know, I could figure out how to do the right thing for a while and force myself to do it or make myself do it. But it just never seemed like it stuck or had sustainability. And again, that story of that, like, I work so hard and I try so hard and I do so much, and then I still end up here in this place where I'm in a shame spiral and I hate myself and my life is a wreck and I don't know where to start again. I don't know how to pick up the pieces and move forward again. I can't even sell myself on the idea that I could do it again, you know. But that's what I did continuously throughout my life, is have a shame spiral, pick myself up, you know, dust myself off, and make a new fantasy to chase. And it probably wasn't until I had like maybe 4 or 5 years, probably about between 3 and 5 years, when it really started to sink in. And I started to understand the connection between this addiction that I have to figuring it out, making the plan, and self-abandoning, and keeping that shame all tucked in nice and tidy over here, you know, that yucky part of me that I don't want to take over, but I'm going to go over here and be perfect. And that's what I'm going to talk more about. So I spent more time on my story, as I always do, than I wanted to. But oh well, there it is. So people who know me know this is how I do it. But so what I want to do is I want to move into a meditation. And part of that is so I can clear out some of that yuckiness that I feel whenever I talk about my story. You know, I want to clear that out, and I want to move into who I am today, and pull that energy back in. Every time I get, you know, when you go into your story, it's like it surfaces again. It you know, that yucky feeling, you know. And so I need to pull in my empowerment. I need to get back into self-love. I need to surrender again my codependence to my higher power. I need to remind myself that I'm safe, that I'm enough, that my life is enough, that my world is enough, and that my legacy doesn't define me, you know, that the love that I carry for myself today, that defines me. You know, my love that my higher power has for me, that defines me, you know. So so we're going to do a meditation, and hopefully it'll take about 10 minutes, I'm thinking. And I'm gonna put on some music. And I can only see about 20 of you right now, but I want to know if you guys can hear the music. So I need some nodding.
Yes.
Or some not nodding.
Yes, we hear it.
Okay. Okay. All right, so I want everybody to get comfortable and breathe and get back in your body, because you've probably been following my story, and that's heavy, and also maybe touching on some of your story. And so we're going to bring some love into all this. Okay, can everybody hear me okay? Okay, all right. All right, what if the shame that you carry that sometimes feels so powerful and so real is actually a big lie and isn't the truth about you at all? What if most of the shame you've been carrying isn't even yours? That it's just someone else's shame that's been passed down to you with hurtful comments, impossible standards, and conditional acceptance. And through abuse or abandonment or neglect that was out of your control. What if all your mistakes were forgiven and all the regrets were released and all the hurts were healed and all problems were actually opportunities? What if you deserved comfort when you were scared? And you deserved compassion when you were hurting? And you deserved grace when you made mistakes? And you deserved attention when you were needy? What if you're actually perfect exactly as you are, with all of your flaws and uniqueness and shortcomings, regardless of what you've done or not done? What if there is no such thing as being bad or not being enough or being a failure? What if you were designed to be exactly as you are, to go exactly where you've been and do exactly what you've done, so you can be exactly who you are today and take the next step you're going to take, and the step after that, and the step after that? What if everything that has happened in your life has had purpose and was meant to be? What if everything you've been chasing has actually been inside you all along? What if that thing is actually love? Not just any love, but love for you. Sweet, precious, amazing, spectacular you. What if you could really surrender all your shame and replace it with love instead? What if all of life's events were just intended to awaken the real you? And your life is a purposeful divine plan for your spiritual awakening. What if you could know God's love right now in a way you've never known before, simply by trading Him your shame for true and real love? What if you accepted that love is your birthright, your sanctuary, and your essence? What if you could truly feel loved for who you really are, without barriers, without masks, without conditions? What if you are the best thing that ever happened to you? What if you are the love of your life? What if a decision is all that stands between you and God, between you and freedom, between you and happiness, between you and love? The decision to surrender your shame. What if you made that third step decision and took that leap of faith? And released a lifetime of self-doubt, self-loathing, and self-abandonment? There is a light within you that is unique to you. It contains all your answers, all your dreams, all your joy. When you love yourself, that light turns on like a switch. Take a moment to turn on your light by sending love to your heart. Feel your light start to glow. Feel the shame wash away as the light of love extends throughout your body and into your life. This light is yours, and you can direct it to anywhere that needs care and healing. Extend this loving light throughout your body, scanning for any shame, and feel it healing and accepting every part of you. Now extend this loving light throughout your life, your relationships, your work, your home, your future, your past. Feel the healing of loving acceptance and grace. Feel the shame dissolve and just melt away. If there are areas of strong shame, just leave a little piece of this loving light there to continue to heal this area and move on, knowing that love heals all. And love is always the answer. You don't have to fight or force or figure it out. Just allow love to be here within and around you, and allow it to do God's work. This is our 7th step in action, humbly asking God to remove our shame. Now let's return to the workshop, but know that you can turn on this loving light within you anytime you want to. And when you're ready, open your eyes. I feel better.
Me too. I didn't want to return to the workshop.
All right, guys. I was asked to make sure that we do a couple of 5-minute breaks. So this is a good spot for that. I do want to keep it at 5 minutes. So we're going to come back at 2:05, and everybody can unmute yourself or talk or run around or go use the restroom or get a drink of water, whatever. And I will see you in 5 minutes. I'm Heidi. I'm codependent. Still.
Hi, Heidi.
Okay, I'm gonna do a screen share. There. Can everybody see that? Okay, good. So I'm gonna be flipping back and forth. I'm gonna work on talking about healthy shame and then toxic shame and the difference between those. And then we're gonna talk about shamelessness, which is how I came to understand that I manage my shame or mismanage my shame. All right, this is the handout that Linda put in the text, right? Okay, and I think it's also on the Arizona CODA events website. Is that?
It will be.
It will be. Okay, it will be.
Putting it in the chat now. It was there previously, but I'll add it again.
Okay, great.
Thanks, Linda.
I'm gonna put out my email address too at the end. So if people want to get me to just send it to them directly, I can do that. But anyway, we're gonna work on it together here. So everyone can see this, right? I just want to make sure I'm in the right.
Yes.
Okay, I'm gonna be looking at you, Jeremiah. You need to be keep me on track here. Okay, so so what is shame and where does it come from? So, you know, healthy shame is a feeling that lets us know when we're not living within our values. Webster's definition of shame is a feeling of guilt, regret, or sadness that you have because you know you've done something wrong. Ability to feel guilt, regret, or embarrassment. So shame in itself is not a bad thing. Like, we often think of shame as like this culprit or the villain, you know, and I certainly do and have, you know, this relationship with shame, but because it feels so yucky, it's such a yucky feeling. But what we're talking about when we talk about codependence is we're talking about toxic shame, and that healthy shame is a feeling that is a part of our moral compass. It's a part of us managing ourselves and our relationships, and it's supposed to feel a little yucky, but it's not supposed to feel like I want to kill myself, or, you know, life's all against me, or I'm a piece of shit. You know, that's toxic shame. So but because most of us have been so damaged by the time we get to CODA, you know, through the events in our lives, and a lot of it is our own self-talk, that we don't know what healthy shame is. We go straight to toxic shame. Anytime something bad happens, we go straight to like the depths of it. There's no such thing as like, oh, that feels a little uncomfortable. Like, no, we're either fine or we're, you know, in a shame spiral. So we have to learn how to understand, you know, that shame is welcome in our lives, and that healthy shame ultimately is the solution for the toxic shame. You know, we have to develop or heal our sense of shame so that we don't go straight into, you know, the toxic part of it. So that'll make more sense in a minute. So healthy shame is nature's way of keeping our balance in relationship to our higher power, others, and our lives. Our self-identity equilibrium, our moral compass, teaches us that we're empowered and vulnerable, not better than or less than. So it's moderating us. It's keeping us sort of in the middle of the road. I'm not better than others. I'm not worse than others. I have my own value. I don't have to be perfect. I don't have to have all the answers. And and that feeling that tells us that we're out of sync with that healthy balance is a good feeling. I mean, how many of us know people that don't have any shame, and how difficult it is to have a relationship with people that are completely shameless? And I am completely shameless when I'm triggered. I mean, that absolutely happens. Not so much anymore, but now and then it does. And especially with my daughter, she's my big trigger right now. I'll talk more about that. But so then toxic shame, it develops due to childhood abuse, abandonment, and neglect. And so I'm going to refer to our Coda book. In chapter 2, our spiritual dilemma, page 18, it says, shame causes us to believe we are less than, stupid, foolish, worthless, inadequate, or unwanted. It diminishes our true sense of identity and destroys our belief that we are loving human beings. It erodes our self-esteem and sense of equality in the world. Damages our sense of self. I am bad instead of I did something bad. Shame-based modeling and mirroring become how we see ourselves. We take it on as an identity. And it's so consuming, we don't know that it's just a feeling or a perception. It really just becomes us. Toxic shame becomes more of an identity instead of just a feeling. So now I'm going to go over here to this little graphic. All right, we're gonna start with this. Here's Heidi. Here's me as a little girl. Look, I'm just a beautiful little pink heart. And here's me in my natural state. Here's me in all of my preciousness. I'm born into the world completely perfect and completely innocent and absolutely lovable, and all the opportunity in the world. And with all that beautiful love that's within me, I'm gonna want to radiate it out into the world. So here's all my love radiating out into the world, and this is love, this is curiosity, this is child's playfulness, this is me learning, this is me testing boundaries. Well, that one's a little squiggy, right? That's me. That's the testing boundaries one right there. So here I am radiating out my life, my preciousness, my life force, or my, this is my energy, and I'm radiating out into the world. And now we're going to put some healthy shame here. So here is healthy shame, which is a boundary that goes around me so that I don't radiate out offensiveness to the world. Okay? So I am taught by healthy, loving caregivers to have some containment, to have a filter, that it's not okay for me to step on others. It's not okay for me to steal the little girl's Legos, without asking, And so healthy shame through healthy childhood experiences teaches me that it's not okay to hurt others, to harm others, that it's also not okay for me to hurt me. Healthy shame teaches me that it's not okay to eat too much. That hurts my stomach. I get a tummy ache if I eat too much, and that feels yucky. The tummy ache feels yucky, but also the healthy shame feels yucky. If I'm school age and I bring home an F on my report card, and I have an appropriate response from a parent figure that says, "Oh, why did you get an F?" And I go, "Well, I was busy, talking to my friend instead of paying attention." Well, that probably wasn't your best choice, was it? Healthy shame gets developed through those kinds of conversations. And I'm given an out. I'm given a way to rectify it. I'm given a way to reconcile it. I'm given a way to improve myself, to learn from it. And that feeling of healthy shame that's like, oh, that feels a little yucky. I don't really like that. I like it better when I bring home a report card that mom looks at and goes, "Oh, great job, you got a B," And so, God, I wish my childhood looked like this. this is not what my childhood looked like, you know. I'm sure I'm not alone in this story, you know. Um, so instead, what happens is that I'm trying to think of an example. So I bring home a C and I show it to my mom, and she says, "Oh, well, that's nice. I got straight A's when I was little. Learning was so easy for me." So I'm taking on some shame from her. I feel like I didn't do it right. I didn't do it enough. And it damages my shame boundary. You know, now I'm not wanting to share myself with everybody. I feel like I'm not sharing right. I'm not sharing enough. I didn't do it right. I've got all these messages going on. Um, you know, oops, get back there. And so, you know, like, let's do another example. So I'm playing in my room and I'm radiating out play and I'm being creative and I've got this whole story going on about, you know, I don't know, deer and owls, and, you know, I'm pretending I'm a bear, and this is all super exciting. And then Dad walks in and catches me, and I was supposed to be cleaning my room. And so he rages. "What are you doing? You're supposed to be cleaning your room. You only care about yourself. You don't care about anybody else." And so he's raging at me. And so again, my shame, instead of having healthy shame, which would have had an opportunity to develop right there, instead, my shame gets toxic and it's damaged and it's wounded. And that feeling of, oh, I did something wrong, turns into, I'm a bad person. I'm bad. I did this to him. I made him abuse me, essentially. And so these are the experiences that happen, that where we don't get that opportunity to build healthy shame. Healthy shame doesn't develop in that kind of environment. So this is, you know, this is the story of how a little girl is like continuously seeking perfectionism, because I'm always wanting to try to manage that next attack on my person, on myself. And the only way to do that is to build this story that I can do it right, if I can just do it right. And in the meantime, with all this, I stop radiating, I stop sharing, I get more cautious, and I start lying. I don't want to share who I really am with the world. I can only share what's safe. What's safe is, you know, I learn over time what's safe, you know, to share. Certainly don't ask somebody why they smoke, right? That's not safe. So I don't even know what's safe to ask. So this is what happens, you know, and then eventually I'm living so far out of what would just naturally radiate out of me. And I'm managing everything all the time to just not feel that yucky feeling of shame. And I'm trying hard to be perfect, but I'm a child, so I don't have a lot of skills in that, you know? And so I get distracted from my continuous people-pleasing shame management, and I play. Oh God, no, not playing, you know? And then shame gets wrapped around play. This is, you know, so what happened for me around this stuff is that I couldn't play. I had a very difficult time. And the only time that it actually came to my attention is when I had children. And now I've got this, I have to be the perfect mom thing going on, right? And the perfect mom plays with her kids. So I'm totally screwed now, because I can't play because I have so much shame around playing, but I have to play in order to not shame myself for not playing. And you know, and it's like this box I can't get out of. So I try to play, but then I'm trying to control the play so much so that I don't get triggered, because there's so much shame around play that it has to all go a certain way and be right and be configured correctly and get exactly what we're supposed to get out of it, you know, and I don't even know why I'm doing all that, you know what I mean? And my poor son has he's like, or we could just not, Mom. It's okay. Poor baby. He's 26 now. He forgives me. Anyway. So yeah, so play became a really big one. And then the other thing is like, okay, here's another example that like, you know, we're driving into town and I'm like, and I see a McDonald's sign and I go, oh, McDonald's, can we stop at McDonald's? You know, and then Dad turns around and he's like, no, we can't stop at McDonald's. We can't afford that because you guys leave the lights on all the time and you waste so much money on this. And I just bought you bicycles last Christmas. And I mean, he just, you know, big shame attack, you know, big rage attack. I don't even know all the stories that are coming at me, you know what I mean? But I just, you know, like I am not safe to want. Now I'm not safe to want something, you know? And so that gets, you know, in the mix too. Like, don't tell people what you want. Don't ask for things. Don't, you know, so this becomes, you know, this becomes how I react to the world. Stay small, be perfect, don't get caught, don't have feelings. And all these little rules start showing up where this is where we become hypervigilant, you know, in our codependence. Always trying to manage what other people are thinking about us, what they're saying, how, you know, how they're feeling. And we're just completely trapped in that. And I made up, not everybody does this, but I made up that I could control it all. And so that was where I directed my energy. I think I talked to other people that instead they just stopped trying. They just didn't try and gave up. And then they gravitate towards the being lethargic around stuff, and or maybe being silent around stuff. I was always a super trier, and neither works. You can't manage people that are addicts and codependents. You can't manage them. You can lay low for a while, maybe come under the radar a little while, but eventually it doesn't work anymore. So okay, we're going to go back to the handout. Okay, so toxic shame and codependence. In the Coda book, chapter 2, Our Spiritual Dilemma, it talks about controlling and avoiding people and circumstances as being some basic traits of codependency. These behaviors create unmanageability in our lives. What drives our need to control and avoid others? The Coda book, page 18, we behave codependently if we allow fear or shame to dictate our lives, causing us to rely on past survival instincts such as control and avoidance. And that's what I'm talking about. Like, that's who I was. Control or avoid everything, especially me. And what's true for me. That's the most dangerous stuff. The most dangerous stuff is what's really going on in here. Coda book, page 18. I already read that. Okay, Coda book, page 19. In experiencing fear and shame as children, it says, as children, our identity, as well as our relationships with our higher power, ourselves and others, were damaged each time we were abused or neglected. We felt shame and naturally feared its reoccurrence. As we continued to experience abuse or neglect, our fear and shame intensified. We learned survival skills in order to cope. We controlled or avoided potentially volatile circumstances. Over time, we learned how to alleviate our fear and shame by controlling and or avoiding ourselves and others. In continuing this behavior as adults, it states, without some form of help, we carry these emotional conflicts and survival patterns into our adult lives. In our adult relationships, we fearfully guard against any sign of shame, abuse, or neglect. We become manipulative or avoid other people and circumstances. This fear can grow stronger than the shame itself. Again, that's the toxic shame management that I do, and that I'm talking about. Yeah, avoid and control. So fear of shame becomes the driving force in our relationship with the toxic shame. We have that memory of how horrible shame feels. And so that fear becomes our continuous guide to always looking for those situations where it might happen again, it might happen again, it might happen again. deep shame is trauma. And trauma, gets stored in the brain in a different way than other childhood memories. And, if there's enough of that going on, that's what builds that hypervigilant, always on the edge of our seats, always anticipating that somebody's going to judge us, somebody's going to leave us, somebody's going to catch us, somebody's going to see us. And it comes from those repeated shame events like that. Events and feelings often trigger the fear of shame to protect us from the shameful feelings. Believe I must not feel shame or else I will die, be destroyed, be abandoned. In other words, it's exaggerated, unrealistic, terrorizing, and devastating. Like we lose all of our adult power, when we're in that fear of shame. It's so, I forget that I'm 50 years old, that I'm a manager, that I'm a mother, that, I'm competent, I can walk out of the room if I want to. I forget all that stuff. And instead, I'm this regressed little kid again, on some level, some subconscious level, I'm this regressed little kid again, trying to not be thrown out on the street, trying to not be publicly humiliated or have my pants pulled down in front of everybody. And I'm not in reality because I'm in trauma and I'm in a trigger and I'm regressed. And we will do almost anything to avoid the overwhelming, painful feelings. And both the fear and the shame are painful. So how do we survive the toxic shame? And this is about the shame management, which is the shamelessness. So instead of feeling shameful, I learned how to feel shameless and deny the shame, escape the shame, abandon the shame, leave the shame behind. And here I am, I'm going to go over here and my story, I'm going to be perfect. And that is extremely shameless. And it was really great coping mechanism. Doesn't really work for life though. and keeps the shame alive. But going back here, so when we avoid the shameful feelings and deny our shame-based reality, we become shameless. Shamelessness creates the opposite effect of the toxic, shameful messages. So instead of feeling less than, I'm going to feel better than. And that was my mission in life until I realized I was doing it. So stupid becomes arrogant. So I'm going to leave this stupid girl behind, okay? And instead, now I'm a know-it-all. And I'm correcting other people. I'm reasserting. I'm like hyper-vigilantly, like always looking for that opportunity to be right, to, say it right, do it right, point it out. And all I'm doing is managing this shame over here that I'm stupid because Dad raged at me and told me that I was stupid. And I've got this stupid shame that, is stupid shame. So I've got this stupid shame over here. And if I can always prove that I'm smart, I'm on top of it, I've got it figured out. Look, I'm smart. Look, I'm smart. But really, what do I become? I become one of those people that points out everybody else's mistakes that people can't stand. I become arrogant. I become better than, and it would just blurt out of my mouth before I even knew it was happening. I mean, just, and I'm still fixing shame because over here, the stupid shame, here's stupid Heidi over here. I have to show up to the world as like smart Heidi. Look, I'm quick. Look, I'm witty. Look, I'm, and keep this stupid Heidi over here in the corner. So foolish becomes proud, worthless becomes conceited, like false confidence is another way to put that. Instead of that feeling, instead of demonstrating that I don't feel good about myself, that I'm apprehensive or shy or instead of exposing my less than, I'm gonna come across like I think I'm the shit. you know, and that false arrogance, that false sort of pseudo confidence is off-putting to people. It's a one-up. It's also not authentic. There's nothing to connect to there. It has its own level of harm that it does in our relationships, you know. But either way, I'm over here. I'm still putting this mask out there in order to manage my my less than shame. That if anybody really knew me, I'm going to act like here's my, you know, I'm confident. I know what I'm doing. I'm fine. That nothing bothers me, you know. So inadequate becomes egotistical. And, you know, these are just examples. This is just kind of my language, but, you know, find your own stuff, or maybe you can't relate to this, lucky you. But this is my recipe of codependence. Feel free to explore your own. But, you know, the other thing, and I this isn't on the handout, but needy becomes needless. So over here, I've got shame-based needy Heidi. Heidi that needs people to care. Heidi that needs to be heard. Heidi that needs to feel important. And so the mask I'm going to wear is that I'm needless. I don't need anybody. I don't need anybody's help. I don't need anybody's input. I don't need you to want me. I don't need you to like me. I don't need anything, you know. Helpless becomes controlling. So over here, I've got shame-based Heidi that's helpless, that, you know, has those feelings of like, I can't figure it out. I don't know what I'm doing. And then over here, I'm trying to figure out everybody else's life and tell them what to do to fix their problems, right? So fearful becomes fearless. I know I did a lot of that in my active addiction, that was part of the allure of that lifestyle, like living on the streets, doing meth, going to parties, going home with strange men, was that I had so much fear. Here's shame-based, fearful Heidi, you know, that men are going to use me, abuse me, rape me. Those things happen. That was my father, right? And so I've got all that shame over here going on. But over here in the world, I'm going to put this mask on of fearlessness, and I'm going to go home with strangers and put myself in the most crazy predicaments, you know, with, you know, questionable morality, and think that's just fine. And that's the Band-Aid that I'm putting on this shame-based person over here that has all this fearful, shame-based, you know, like I'm going to be abused. I'm going to be hurt. I'm going to be wounded. I'm going to be, you know. So pathetic becomes rebellious, and passive becomes defensive. So anyway, those are some of mine that you guys can play with. Have fun with that. And I'm gonna go on down here. So shameless, codependent patterns and characteristics. I wanted to tie this into the patterns and characteristics because those are such the cornerstone of my recovery. Super revealing and wonderful 4-step material. So shamelessness drives many of the codependent defects of character. So as related to control patterns, caretaking, you know, shame-based Heidi over here, right? What was, you know, the messages I got around my, you know, around my selfishness, you know, so I've got this selfish shame over here. You're so selfish, you don't care about anybody. So the mask I'm going to wear and the shamelessness that I'm going to project out there is that I'm caretaking everybody. And I'm going to just ignore this big pile of shame that I've got back here about being called selfish. I'm not allowed to look at me, take care of me, set boundaries for me, put me first. That's not safe. I'm not going to do that. I don't pay any attention to that shame. Instead, I'm out here putting my nose where it doesn't belong and caretaking everybody else. So, you know, manipulation, fixing, attention seeking, rescuing, demanding, projecting shame and blame, rebelling, a lot of control patterns in my codependence. As related to avoidance patterns, judgment, intimacy blocking, manipulation, addictions, invulnerability, push-pull tactics, unemotional, ungrateful, etc. And then as related to denial patterns, one up. And one up is behind all this, you know, I mean, really, essentially, shamelessness is one up. And so, you know, the basic denial here is that I got shame. I have shame. I'm shame-based. I have shame, and shame gets triggered, and I immediately go into denial. How do I fix that? I'm fixing it so fast, I don't even know I have it. I don't even know shame was triggered. When I first got here, I didn't even know I had shame. I already did that. I already fixed that in counseling. Okay, that's really funny now to think about, but I was pretty sure that, you know, I mean, I could look at the defects of character and see my arrogance and see my, my controlling nature, and that I was a rager. And it was hard for me to identify shame in there. Like, no, shame is not my problem. I am too full of myself. That's the problem. And it's no, shame is the problem. Shamelessness is also a problem. But behind that shamelessness is shame, deep, deep shame. And I had to get vulnerable and honest enough with myself and break those denial patterns in order to see it come up, in order to be safe enough in myself to feel my shame. Because my defense mechanisms, which was the shamelessness, were so quick, they were so automatic, that the only time I ever felt shame was in a shame spiral. And really, it was all or nothing, you know? I would shame spiral, and then I'm totally in shame. So I was just really good. I was just really good at it. But again, that's my, you know, that was my shame management recipe. Everybody has their own ways of managing this stuff. So it also relates to the low self-esteem and compliance patterns. And it works for a while, but the consequences of shamelessness are that it creates the illusion of safety, control, and feeling normal. And that's how we feel when we're caretaking somebody and it's working. Like, for a little while it works, you know? And when we're in caretaking, we're out of ourselves. We feel valuable. I feel in charge. I feel in control. I'm a good person. They like me. That's a bonus, right? And so it's only when it's not working that we go into the shame spiral and then back into the shame, you know? But when it's working, we're like, this is awesome. I'm safe. I'm in control. I'm a good person. And it manages the shame. But in reality, shamelessness is self-abandonment and stuffing feelings. And it's driven by the toxic shame, and it keeps the toxic shame alive, which is the biggest part that I had to hit bottom with, is that all these things I do to manage the shame keep the shame alive. All it does is just scoot it to the back, you know, while I'm over here, you know, being happy for a minute, or thinking I'm in charge for a minute, or thinking that I got it fixed for a minute, but ultimately it's going to stop working, and I'm going to shame spiral again. Even while we're experiencing arrogance, entitlement, and pride, under the surface, we're reinforcing the toxic shame because we've deserted our authentic self and neglected our needs. Feelings and needs build up due to shameless self-abandonment until eventually it stops working. So I'm going to go back to the graphic. And show a little bit about what this looks like. So here's me and all my shame. I love me, or me. And so I'm going to get shameless. So I'm going to do that by, I'm just going to go up here, and I'm going to leave me behind. I'm going to abandon me down here. All that crap, okay, right? It's all just going to go away. It's all just going to go down there. Leave it alone. And I'm going to make a story up. Here's the real Heidi, wink, wink, right? Here's the real Heidi. Here's my little perfect fantasy of Heidi. Here's how I'm going to keep everything in control. Here's how I'm in charge. Here's how everybody likes me. Here's how, you know, I eat just the right amount. I exercise the right amount. How I don't ever have evil thoughts about people. How I don't ever get triggered. Here's perfect Heidi with all of her straight A's. And I'm going to just live up here and leave this big mess behind. So this is shamelessness, and that's how I do it. I just abandon me. Screw that. I'm not her. I don't identify with any of that, and I'm going to go up and live in this fantasy story of how I'm trying to act. Here's what I'm putting out to the world. Here's the fantasy that I'm selling myself on. The truth is I'm abandoning myself. I'm not caring for my shame. I'm not identifying it. I'm not healing it. I'm not owning it. And I'm off over here making up a story, being somebody else. And ultimately that's just telling me that I'm not enough. I'm all those things that everybody said about me, that's all true. All this is all true. And so I'm going to go, up here and play by myself instead. So sooner or later it stops working. I'm a human being, and I have to live within the system that my higher power created. And I'm really down here. Like, that's really me. That's really me down there. And so sooner or later, I'm going to shame spiral. And that's going to look like this. And I'm going to end up right back down there in the shame with all that stuff flooding back in, all those old messages, all that craziness, all the overwhelming feelings that have been building up over my whole life, and now they're compounded because I just abandoned me again one more time, to go pretend I'm someone else, and reinforced that all that is really bad about me. All that is really bad about me, and I'm just bad. So I'm going to go back to the handout. Okay. So eventually it stops working and we go into a shame spiral. The shamelessness fix ends when repressed shame and fear start to flood in, even though shamelessness is escalating, trying to keep up. Always just trying to stay a step ahead of it. Shame is an emotion, energy in motion, all energy answers to natural law. So it's like denying gravity until eventually we fall. Like holding your breath until your body forces you to take a breath of air. And usually a triggering event tips the scales. And the wall of denial is broken. The denial of the fantasy that I created about me being perfect, or about me fixing it, or me being, or whatever fantasy. It could be a fantasy about somebody else being perfect, or how I'm going to do things, or how things are going to turn out. It could be just an expectation that I create about something. So in the Codebook, page 118, what is a shame spiral? When we experience overwhelming feelings of worthlessness, apathy, or panic, we may believe there is no solution or end to our pain. Our feelings and beliefs seem to take on a life of their own, and we feel isolated, rejected, foolish, or stupid. We may berate or push ourselves harder to meet someone else's expectations, engage in unhealthy sexual behavior, compulsively eat or starve ourselves, or try to escape from a situation by avoiding people. All of these behaviors cause our negative feelings to intensify, and we feel more pain and confusion, and we call this a shame spiral. Without intervention, our shame will spiral even more and may result in a crisis situation. So once we're back, let me me see. I'm going to do a new one. Don't say it. That's how easy it is to get rid of shame, guys. See that? You just delete. All right, that's the end of the workshop. Okay, sorry. I'm a jackass. All right. Okay, so I'm going to go back down here and recreate some of this stuff. So there's lovely little me. There's my healthy shame. And there's me radiating out into the world in all of my preciousness. And then dun dun dun. Okay, abuse and shame and crazy and yuck. And okay, so there's all that, right? Okay, so we're back where we were. And now I go, oh, I'm just going to get shameless. Okay, and I come up here and that's just great. And I make this little story up. La, la, la. Okay, and then that doesn't work. And oh no, here I go. Oh, I hate myself. Okay, so now escalating. Stop it. Okay, so escalating toxic shame is that now I have to use harder. Okay, so whatever fantasy that I'm creating has to trump the other one and has to make a bigger fantasy that creates more serotonin and dopamine, right? Because really I'm just a chemical factory. I've got to make a bigger story up. So so now I'm farther away from my precious self, right? There's more barriers between me and my wholeness, my core, my sacred self. Look at how far I am away from the problem and the answer, because the solution is to go within, find my higher power, and heal this shit. And instead, I'm way off here, you know, pretending and making stories up and abandoning the self, which is the only place that healing can happen. I can't build a happy life out here that's fulfilling. Fantasy lives don't work. All it does is just create false feelings of happiness in our head with dopamine and serotonin, but those are not sustainable. It's just like using, it's just like having a beer. After the beer's gone, then your life still sucks. And you have to have another beer and then another beer. And so in this scenario, I have to have another fantasy and another fantasy and a better fantasy and a better fantasy. And I'm setting up a scenario where my life is never going to be enough. I am never going to be enough. And this is what I do. But not anymore. I don't do that anymore. Often. So from here, the shame spiral is even more painful because we're falling farther and we've abandoned ourselves deeper. So we're continuing to proliferate this deep shame within us that I am so ugly. I am so ugly inside. I am so bad inside. I am so broken, so wrong. And then the next story has to be even grander, you know, that I can fix my life, that I can be perfect, that I can figure all this out, right? So sad, so sad. All right, so I'm gonna go back to the handout. All right, so escalating toxic shame, feeling deeper shamefulness than before due to the self-abandonment and acting out and acting in. Reinforces or proves that I'm broken, bad, flawed, wrong. Like when the shame gets a hold of me in that shame spiral, all it says is shit like, see, you'll never figure it out. You are the problem. All this is working for everyone else, but none of it works for you. I mean, it's just horrible, the berating. It's horrible. The messages are just atrocious, you know, just violently hateful. And you know, and ultimately when I'm raging at myself, it's like I'm trying to get shameless again. Even though I'm beating me up, I'm in rage. So raging at me is me trying to get shameless and get out of the shame. If I beat myself up enough, if I hate me enough, if you know, criticize myself enough, even though I'm looking down at me, but I feel better for a minute. I feel, better. Raging at me is still a one up. And it feels better than that, that horrible, horrible feeling of the shame spiral, you know? So we eventually manage our shame in autopilot. We're already in shamelessness before we've even recognized the shame or fear of shame occurred. Shame spirals can be an hour, a day, or a decade, and it really just depends on what you're I could essentially have well, here's me managing shame in this area, and then here's this area, and this area, and this, and there's like 10 different shame management going on all at the same time. Well, this one is about dieting and my body and sexual shame, and then this one is about being a mom, and then this one is about my work and workaholism, and then this one is about, it's like I'm using multiple drugs, right? Like here's heroin and alcohol and meth and pot, and use this to get down and this to get up, and I'm managing them all and trying, and like, yuck, this is my codependence, and all of that is very extreme self-abandonment, and obviously leads to like a hopeless place of no matter how hard I try, I can't fix it. I'm out there playing Monopoly, with myself, trying to figure out a way out. And I have no idea that the way out is in. I think the answer's out there. So as shameless behaviors progress to keep the shame at bay, addictions can develop. Oh yeah. Masks the real issue, which is the toxic shame. So then the focus becomes about controlling the addictions. And in control, out of control, shameful, shameless, blah, blah, blah. And the addiction becomes the focus instead of the shame inside. That kept me, busy for a long time without knowing what the real problem was. The higher we get with shamelessness, the further we have to fall and the harder we hit. Shame has been carried, stuffed, and mismanaged over our lifetimes, amplifying it and increasing our tolerance to healthy levels of feeling realities, stunting our emotional development. I did not know which way was up by the time I got here. I had been playing these mental mind games with myself for so many years, convincing myself of things to medicate with the fantasy addictions of I'll be okay when, I'll figure it out when, this is their fault, I was betrayed. Just all the stories going on are all about shame management. And by the time I got to Coda, I didn't know which way was up. What's mine? What's yours? Who did what? It's all just, because all of that story just became ammunition in my shame management. It wasn't a way to care about myself. I was using it all in my shame management. Here's my victim shame, shamelessness, and now I'm in a shame spiral right back down into that, Okay. At some point, we're acting out and acting in and not even getting fixed anymore and feeling overwhelmed by life. And we have to get even more shameless than before to fix the shame. So that is the end of the shitty part of the workshop. Ta-da! That's all about the disease. And now we're going to talk about recovery. And first, we're going to do another 5-minute break. And actually, why don't we do a little, let's do the first part of the worksheet first, since it's before 3. So we're going till 4, right?
Yes, we have.
Okay, good. It's kind of late in the game to ask that question. Right? See, that's me giving up my perfectionism. Yay.
Yay.
So I want for us to Now is time for people to do their own work around this. I want you guys to, does everybody have paper and pen? If you don't, grab some. And I want, let me see, let me flip down here. Okay. So the worksheet is the last page in the handout. And now it's on the screen, right, Jeremiah?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so so now this is about everybody identifying their own personal patterns of shame management so that we know what to turn over and what needs to be arrested and surrendered. And we know where we're getting in the way. So this is, you know, shamelessness is really like another way to frame when we say we give our will and our life to God in our third step. Shamelessness is how I take it back. That's what I do. That's how I take it back. So, so number one, I repeatedly have shameful feelings about. And some of my examples are raging at my son, my weight, being late, my friend not calling me, overdrawing my bank account, etc. So I guess the idea would be to choose one or two things that you chronically see yourself, that circles back up, that's always there, that feels like it just keeps resurfacing, you keep trying to fix it. It like whack-a-mole. It pops up, you smack it down. It pops up, you smack it down. It pops up, you smack it down. And we're going to do some work on that. And then in that area, make a list of the shameful messages that you have around that. So I'll give you guys an example. Okay. So, so here is precious little Heidi. And here is her healthy shame boundary. There's my original feeling of shame, right? God-given feelings of shame. And my dad comes along and he starts calling me chubby and chunky and fat because he is a sex addict. And so he greatly values skinny women's bodies, and my shame triggers him. My fat triggers him. My pudginess, my chunkiness, my eating too much at the dinner table. He wants to have daughters who are cute and attractive and little sex objects. So that was disgusting, but okay, I had to say it. So so then dad's shame starts to get on me, and I watch my dad shame my mother. My mother was obese, and so I watch my father shaming my mother. There's some more shame for me. I start going on diets when I'm 7 or 8 years old, and I fail at them, and that just continues to build my shame. Like one time, I think my dad bet me $100 I couldn't lose 10 pounds in a certain amount of time. I don't remember what it was, you know, and I gained weight because of this shame management stuff during that time. And so just failure after failure, you know, and so, you know, shame management is, again, like, oh, here's, you know, here's the fantasy story of I'll go on a diet, you know, and then here's the shame spiral. And now here's the fantasy story of, oh, this time I have a rowing machine. Oh, well, that's going to do it. Now I'll be motivated. Okay, then, you know, okay, now here's the, you know, $50 a month gym membership. Oh, this is the great fantasy. Okay, oh my God, right? So So all this comes from the shame messages that I'm managing around all that core stuff that originally happened. So that's what we want to look at, is where did those original messages get there? And then how did we manage them with other harmful messages? So I'm going to go back to the handout. All right, so make a list of shameful messages. So shameful messages for me: I'm fat and disgusting. I hate myself. I'm not enough. People will leave me. I'm gross. I don't deserve to live. I'm ugly. I'm out of control. I'll never figure this out. People will hate me. So those are the shameful messages that we want to try to identify. So I'm going to go on to number 3. So what I usually do to fix or control this is, so I plan a diet, right? I'm going to get shameless with the perfect plan of, I'm going to have, 500 calories a day. You know, I'm gonna like totally starve myself. I'm gonna be in such great control, you know, or I'm gonna get up at the crack of dawn every single day and get out there and blah, blah, blah. You know, there's the perfect plan. So I want you to identify how you try to fix or control the shame around this, in this area for you. Okay, I'm going to go on. So make a corresponding, we're on number 4 now. Make a corresponding list of the shameless messages. So these are the fantasies or expectations. So for me, my diet, sexual fat shame fantasy stories are that I will be sexy and powerful. People will like me. That I'm better than, and usually better than me, better than the pathetic lump of fat that I was yesterday. It's very one-up energy for me. People will be attracted to me. I'll find Mr. Right. People will love me. I'll feel invincible. I have fantasies about weight loss, fixing everything in my life. I've been fantasy dieting. I've had diet fantasies my entire life, one of my biggest core addictions. And I have attributed it to happiness, financial gain, well-being. I can't even describe how much fantasy there is around everything in my life will be better when I lose 10 pounds. I mean, it is so fantasy based that it will fix all my relationships, that I'll never have financial dilemmas. I'll just have this, I'll just float around life like with this sense of well-being. I have attributed so much fantasy to that because I have told myself that story to get shameless, to escape the shame, literally thousands and thousands of times over 50 years. Literally, like daily for years and years and years upon end. Like I would wake up in the morning and the first thing that I would do is a sexual fat shame assessment and create the story of the perfect diet plan that would fix that shame. And chronic, I mean, just absolutely chronic. And of course, that has everything to do with the fact that that shame is so core to my survival, having been, because of the sexual abuse, because of my dad threatening to abandon the family because my mom gained weight. I mean, just all of that, I mean, it's written into like such deep cell tissue, I think. And part of the fantasy is that I will finally be fixed. I will finally be better. I finally will be happy. I finally will be enough, that all this will go away. You know, and I don't know that what I want is the shame to go away, that I want the shame spiraling to go away, that I want the shame management to go away, that what I really want is to just be enough. And that a diet isn't the answer for that. I don't even know that. I do now. So I'm going to give you guys a few minutes, couple minutes to work on number 4. Okay, so number 5 is what actually happens, and this is the consequences. So in my experience, this cycle leads me to a binge and gaining weight, and definitely a shame spiral. So I set myself up. I might do great with the diet for a week, or maybe 2 days, or maybe 2 weeks, you know, if I'm really dedicated. And I'm staying above the shame and staying in control and keeping it all motivated and totally, you know, and then a girlfriend invites me out to lunch, and instead of picking a salad, I'll have mac and cheese or something. And then I'm fine while I'm there, and then I can convince myself that it's just fine. But then I leave, and now I'm going to stop at QT on my way home and get a gallon of ice cream. And there's my binge, and I'm going to binge the rest of the day. And, you know, I'm binging now to fix the first shame, that I broke my perfectionism, right? So I'm trying to keep from shame spiraling. And the way that I'm going to keep from shame spiraling is to keep shoving food in my mouth and medicating myself. But ultimately, I'm just waiting for the big shame spiral, which is going to hit me, you know, by the end of the night when I have a stomach ache. And I've eaten everything that I can find in the cupboards, you know, and I'm running out of rice cakes. And so yeah, so that's what shameless control leads to for me, in that perfect plan stuff. And when I shame spiral, that's what I kept doing. And the same thing was true for the perfect plan to keep my house clean. You know, I'm gonna be such a good homemaker. I'm gonna keep all the house clean. I'm gonna have 1 day a week that I do the bathroom, and 1 day a week I do. I'm gonna have the perfect plan, and here's how it's all mapped out. And I'm gonna do it first thing when I come home from work. And la 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 la. I've got all the perfect little plan, and that's all my little shameless control and perfect plan and stuff. And then as soon as I slip at all off of that, then I'm neglecting, and I'm gonna abandon it. I'm gonna let it all build up. Next thing I know, 2 weeks have gone by, and I'm tripping over stuff, and the sink is full of dirty dishes, and I don't even know what happened. What the fuck just happened? And that's, sorry, but that was my token F-bomb. So that's what shamelessness doesn't lead to moderation. It doesn't allow, and we'll talk more about that in the recovery part, which is what we're going to move into next, is how to do it better instead, how to do it differently. But shamelessness does not create change. It does not create healthy change. It might fix it for a minute, but it also is setting up my next shame spiral. So I'm going to go ahead and go, okay, I think we probably should do a 5-minute break.
Yeah.
And okay, so 3:15.
All right.
Okay. Okay, welcome back, everybody. I'm Heidi, I'm Codependent. And I'm going to go back to my screen. And what we're going to talk about now is recovery. So, what to do instead. And this isn't fun because it feels really powerless to do nothing. And what we're going to learn about is how to do nothing. Really, I mean, it's not nothing, but when we have this pattern of creating the story of I have to do this to fix it, and we've been doing that for so many years that resisting that urge is like it's giving up addiction, essentially, and it's terrifying, you know, in some cases, you know, to to not follow that cycle through, but instead to sit on our hands and do nothing and let the shame be there. So it's not fun, you know, it's not fun getting through this stuff, you guys, and but it's worth it, and we're worth it, and healing is worth it. So intervening on the shameful, shameless spirals. Identifying when you're triggered, shameful or shameless, and putting yourself in timeout. So I had to learn what all that meant, you know, when I was being shameful or shameless, and learning how to just freeze, like just stop, like just not react, not try to rescue or fix it or react to it or escalate it, you know. You know, you could also call timeout like a pause, taking a pause. If timeout feels uncomfortable to use that, like you feel disciplined or something, it might be easier to use the word pause. And that's a recovery term that we use too, is pause. And so if you're feeling, if it has anxiety around it, if you feel pressure, if it feels, if you're feeling that fear of shame, then the question is like, how can I take a look at this and not get reactive and not let the shame dictate what I'm going to do next? Because that's what it's going to do. The shame is going to dictate it. You know, our history is going to dictate it. We're going to go right into our autopilot of shameless mechanisms to fix it, you know. So, you know, with me, it's rage, some avoidance, but not, that's usually not my, usually I'm more of a confronter than an avoider. Poor Vince. And so, you know, usually I'm going to try to control it instead of run away. But I'm definitely going to have this autopilot response that I want to fix the shame right away before it somehow, and it's already there. It's already showed up. So I need to just admit that I'm powerless, that I'm triggered, and put myself in timeout before I do more harm. Obsessing, positive or negative obsessing while triggered does harm. That's another workshop. And I, you know, I only know that because I'm really good at obsessing. I can take and make a mountain out of a molehill in my head and create all kinds of drama, all kinds of intensity, all kinds of fear, you know, fear and terrify myself about something if I'm engaged in thinking about it while my trigger's active. So I really have to learn that skill of saying, I'm triggered, I've got shame going on, I need a timeout, I need to not think about this, I need to have boundaries, I need to reach out to a sponsor, I need to pray, And I need to not pick up no matter what. And that goes back to my NA recovery, because you know that's what I want to do. I want to pick up. I want to, you know, picking up for me is go in my head and build a case. You know, make my fantasy escape plan. You know, or come up with a list of reasons how I'm going to confront this person and what I'm going to accuse them of, or what's the perfect answer, how am I going to do this perfect, how am I going to get 48 hours worth of things done in 24 hours. I'm going to force it, I'm going to make it happen. You know, I've got this big deadline coming, I've got all this shame around it, let's just say, and I've got too much to do and too much on my plate, and I've been procrastinating forever, and now it's down to the wire, and I've got all the shame from procrastinating, right? And now I'm going to pull it off in 24 hours. I'm going to do a whole week's worth of shit. And so I need the perfect plan, right? That's going to involve like a lot of fantasy, a lot of shamelessness, a lot of self-abandonment. Um, and so I need to not use. If I've got my shame triggered, I need to not use. That's not where my answers come from. They don't come from out there in fantasy world. They come from my higher power. They come from my heart. They come from balance. They come from spiritual principles. So spiritual principles: humility, love, compassion, care, empathy, service, surrender. Not the perfect plan, not controlling it all, not sticking my head in the sand either, you know? And so I've got to neutralize that system and that cycle. I've got to get off that hamster wheel if I can. Get equal with the person I'm one out and one down with, and especially if it's me. So if I've got a big shame trigger where I'm raging about somebody, or I feel like like they betrayed me somehow, or they discounted my value, or they don't see how hard I'm trying, and I've got those kinds of victim stories going on in my head, the first thing I need to do is put myself in timeout so that I'm not pulling them into my drama, and I'm not doing harm in the relationship from this wounded place and spewing my shame all over them. And, you know, and not to say that there's not things that need my attention, or that need to be discussed, or that need to be negotiated with this person. I'm not saying any of that. I'm just saying I can't do it from the trigger. I can't do it from this shame management. I'm not going to pull that person into my shame management. If I can get a one up over them, I'm going to feel better. And I know that. So I don't want to use them as leverage to fix my shame. That's not fair. It's not healthy. It's not right. I don't like it when other people do it to me. So I have to get equal with that person. And what that means is having some self-talk that looks like, I'm, you know, first of all, I'm safe, I'm okay, God's got it, God's got me, right? And this person is my equal. They deserve to be respected. I deserve to be respected. They deserve to have choices. They deserve to be talked to, you know, without being attacked. They, you know, that they're doing the best they can. I'm doing the best I can, you know, so find that language that gets you equal with them. And I call that right-sized. And when I'm right-sized, I'm not one up, one down, or putting them one up or one down. Then I'm not creating toxicity in that dynamic. So I'm going to want to use my 7th step instead of trying to control my defects of character and addiction. So I've got to surrender, humbly ask God, humbly ask God. And in a trigger, it's easy now for me to say, like, wow, I am going to blow this up. You know, like, this trigger's big. My shame is big. I know how to identify it now because I have some language for it and some experience with it. And so it's easy to say for me now, it's easy to say that humble prayer of like, wow, God, I got to give this to you. This is bigger than me. And I'm going to really, I'm going to really screw things up here if this is left in my hands. Like, my shame, my trigger, my wounded teenager is going to do harm here. Please help me with this. Please help me get right-sized. Please help me surrender this to you. You know, please help me heal whatever's under this. and really working my 7th step hard from that triggered place. Addressing the toxic shame, driving the shamelessness instead of fixing it. So as we're going through these things, I want you guys to finish the handout and choose the things that feel like they will be good tools for you. And that's the bottom part of the, it's the recovery plan, which is the what do I do instead? So identify things in here or other stuff that you can identify that what your recovery plan is when you see that you're in the middle of shame management. So feel the feelings that are being stuffed. What is it that I've been neglecting all this time? And now here I am in the shame spiral, right? And I can either get high again and escape the shame and start the process all over, or I can sit in the shame, heal the shame, turn it over to my higher power, and feel the feelings that are being stuffed, including the shame. The shame needs to be healed too. It's just a feeling. So the toxic shame needs to be surrendered, but shame itself needs my care and my presence and my loving self-parenting in order for healthy shame, which is a feeling and a component of my being, in order for that to be healed and restored to sanity. So some healthy shame is necessary for me to feel. I don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. You know, I need to have some healthy shame too. So healthy shame says, you know, I have a lot of shame and I could do a lot of harm with this. You know, healthy shame says, you know, I'm right where I'm supposed to be. You know, healthy shame says, I'm powerless over fixing this. You know, and shame makes my life unmanageable. You know, healthy shame says that I can't do this by myself. I need to call my sponsor. You know, so when identifying that you're in shameful, I'm down here, ask yourself if how you were shameless. And that's part of the healthy shame too, is that what did I do to contribute to getting here? I'm not responsible for my childhood wounds that created the original shame, but I am responsible for my shame mismanagement that keeps me cycling and escalating and like I said, spewing my shame over others or continuing to self-abandon and all of those things. So ask myself, how was I shameless? You know, what ways did I self-abandon? What ways was I making up stories? In what ways was I in an expectation instead of in reality? In what ways did I fix it instead of care for it, you know, so to speak? Developing a healthy self-parent to lovingly hold yourself accountable and protect you from the toxic shame. That loving mother within that I have developed for me that says, I love you no matter what, no matter how bad you act out, no matter how much woundedness you have, no matter how much damage you do. I love you. I'm here. I'm here for the long haul. You're precious. I need you. You mean everything to me. And I'm not going to leave you behind because you make mistakes. You know, we're going to heal this together. A commitment to whatever it takes to recover. So building healthy shame and learn to be right-sized. Making friends with healthy shame and breaking through the toxic shame. Rescuing my authentic self. My I am. You know, one of the first shaming messages that my head used to always say is, I shouldn't feel this way. You know, which is super shameless. You know, I shouldn't get triggered. I shouldn't have shame. I shouldn't be wounded. I shouldn't ever have problems. My life should always be hunky-dory. I mean, what kind of fantasy is that, you know? And so if I've got that going on underneath of all these shame cycles, I'm keeping myself stuck in that. Like, how about I let that go and say, you know, I'm codependent. I'm going to have shame. I'm going to have shame spirals. I'm going to be lost sometimes. I'm not going to know what to do. I'm going to get triggered. Intimacy is hard for me. I have a shit ton of intimacy wounds. You know, that's just what I'm signed up for. And I just love and accept that right from the gate. Then I'm not getting shameless, and I already am a little shameless just with that fantasy that I shouldn't be triggered, I should be fine, I should always have it under control, I should never feel shame. No, I will feel shame, you know, and healthy shame is necessary. But with the wounds that I'm carrying, I will probably always have some level of toxic shame, and that will get on the people around me, and I can learn to do less damage with that, especially to me. But healthy shame means that I have to live with this, and it's okay, and it gets better. God's will for me keeps me right-sized. So taking care of my needs, air, water, food, rest, shelter, love, well-being, joy, support, health, companionship, safety, growth, etc. Right-sized means not denying my needs and not asking other people or holding other people responsible for supplying my needs. And I can ask people to participate in me meeting my needs and doing and having a part in that, but that's a request, not a demand or an expectation. Accepting my humanness and my vulnerability. Right-sized is relative, not absolute. And this is important. What's right-sized for me is not necessarily right-sized for you. What's right-sized is unique to everybody, and their skills, their abilities, their wounds, their self-awareness, you know, whatever they're carrying. So there's not this cookie cutter answer that we can just run around and put on everybody. There's a right way to be and a wrong way to be. That's a shame system. That's a shame-based system. So me finding my own right-sized is about me and God. Practice appropriate levels of power in relationships. Relationships with myself and others and my higher power. So that's learning responsibility and compromise and negotiation versus control and avoidance. Like, you're either my everything or you're my nothing. You know, either you're the one in charge or I'm the one in charge, you know, and that kind of shame-based power and control between people that we have historically done. Moderation is a spiritual principle. And moderation was such a powerful awareness for me when I found it, that I wrote it on sticky notes and put it all over my house, on my computer, the phone banner, I mean, everywhere I could, because I like, moderation was like, what? I'm an addict, right? I don't do anything in moderation. You know, moderation is some theory out there, but in order to fix my shame, my whole life, I'd always done everything in extremes. Extreme passion, extreme expectations, extreme performance, you know, and then those led to extreme neglect, extreme failure, extreme rage, you know, so everything was extreme. And so moderation was like, huh, you know, and moderation has become like a spiritual principle for me. I mean, well, I think it already was, but I have identified it as a spiritual principle, and find value for it, because I used to think that it was like half-assed. Like, if you're going to do something, right? But there's that shameless drive of perfectionism and control and demand, and the energy behind that is so critical and controlling. And that was my self-parenting until I learned how to self-parent with moderation. So it's a really great self-parenting tool, and it arrests the all or nothing symptom of codependence. The closer we get to healthy shame, the larger the gap between the trigger and the behavior grows. So it's stages. It comes in stages. The restoration of sanity is that, you know, first I used to identify shame when I was in a shame spiral, you know, and then it backed up so that I could identify it when I was still acting out before I spiraled. You know, like, okay, I'm raging, and okay, walk away, you know, and then I could identify it before I was acting out, where like, oh, I can feel it coming, and I could identify it was coming, but I still couldn't stop acting out, you know. And then eventually God helped me to intervene before I was acting out, you know. And now I can see like the whole scenario play out in my head before I even participate, and I go, well, I better go pray, you know. And I just don't even have to do any of it. Not always, but often. And that is the restoration to sanity. And it takes time, and it takes triggers, and it takes walking through triggers and then going back and doing the healing work, you know, to take your inventory, turn it over, do your 7th step, you know, forgive yourself, you know, figure out what's that stupid shame that's back here. What's that trip over yourself shame back here? What's that lazy shame over here? Whatever that shame is, and take it out and care for it and love it, so that it's not a time bomb in your life waiting for you to set it off. And then affirmations are always big. You know, it's okay to make mistakes, pay real close attention to our self-talk. I'm doing the best that I can. I love myself. I'm equal to others. I'm enough. Those are big. There is down here some right-sized affirmations. I wrote some out, and these are some of mine, but I left some lines so people can add to them. I am strong and also vulnerable. And now I see vulnerability as a bigger strength than strength is. I mean, it's crazy. But after a while, your value system gets on board, and you really start to value different things because they work, because they're healthy, because they feel right-sized and in alignment with your higher power's will for you. I am loving, as are we all. So I'm not using I am loving as a one-up. I am loving and I'm right-sized. I am loving, as are we all. And what I mean by that is our nature is loving. And doesn't mean everybody's acting that way, but our nature is loving. I am special, and so is everyone. And that allows me to not be in that one-up place where I have to always be in a strategy of maintaining my ego, maintaining my one-up, maintaining my shame leverage, so to speak. So anyway, there's some of that. Now, what I want us to do is now is the time for us to break into small groups so that people can share their worksheet in small groups and talk about what they have discovered as far as their own patterns of shame management. You can share about what you have shame about, how that, you know, maybe came to be, where that comes from in your childhood, how you managed it as a child, maybe, and then how you became shameless with it to manage it as an adult, avoiding it, neglecting it, being perfect. I mean, everybody's got their own ways of doing it and looking at it. And then what that has resulted in, the shame messages. And so, you know, and then the shame spiraling, and then how you try harder. Or hopefully you'll just get in your little breakout group and say, oh, I don't do any of that. Yeah, but, and then your recovery plan. So which of the things, you know, what are some tools that you have, or that you are learning, or that you want to practice that will help you to intervene on that, like a timeout, affirmations, like the using some right-sized muscle, and definitely like the calling my sponsor, journaling, prayer, those kinds of things also. Okay, all right, then let's go ahead and take the until 4 o'clock, and we'll do the break off groups with 4 people and go till 4. So since there's a bunch of us, I'm gonna share something. Guess who this is?
Is it you?
I'm such a dork. Okay, so here's beautiful little me, and so you know, what I wanted to say is that that this is you know, here's my shame, and healthy shame, and then here's me radiating out into the world, and that and that when we're sharing with each other, we're letting other people have healthy mirroring for us. So this is the gift that we get in recovery, is that we get to put ourselves out there, and then we get healthy mirroring back that we didn't get when we were little. And so we get messages that, you know, you are enough, and you are interesting, and, you know, you're smart, and you're capable, and you're okay even though you make mistakes, and we get all that here that we didn't get before, and that helps us to restore our healthy shame back to its, you know, healthy functioning. Ta-da! So that's the gift of sharing our stuff with other people who are trustworthy and healthy, and allow us to be vulnerable. So thank you all, because all of you were my healthy mirrors today, even though I didn't really ask you what you thought. But a lot of people share with me that they're grateful, and that they relate, and I always get a big wave of healing, loving, healthy shame, restoring stuff. So it's always good for me. Workshops are always healthy and healing for me. Everyone should do them. Right. Well, and what I've discovered is that I have to give up the fantasy chase, and then where the rubber hits the road, live my life right here, right now. And, you know, part of that fantasy, you know, that the fantasy and the shame spiraling keeps me stuck in procrastination, and then you know, which is neglect essentially, you know, and then fear of, like, there's so much pressure to do it perfect, like it has to be so off the charts that I don't even get started. Because I've scared the crap out of myself, because my whole well-being and my whole self-value is riding on this, you know what I mean? Yeah. And so there isn't any allowance for the just do a little bit, just take the first step, you know. There's no room for the, well, let's just go explore it. Okay, well, let's just do now. You know, what would be one thing I can do to move in that direction, you know? And it can't look like that. It has to be this extravagant, it has to blow my mind, you know, it has to meet all the expectations, you know, and instead, and it doesn't have to. That's just to qualify it for my fantasy addiction. That's because I'm preventing a shame spiral. If I don't set up a shame spiral to begin with, I'm not managing a shame spiral. I'm able to take a step forward, and then just be in affirming myself for taking a step. Like, that's the restoration of sanity, is that I can take action right-sized without it being based on the expectation of arrival, you know, I can just take a baby step and then just take a baby step. And those are enough, you know, and then heal the shame one step at a time. As I take those steps, that shame is going to come up. The shame of the big, extravagant, looming, holy shit, have to measure up thing, you know. And instead I can just go, okay, I made a dent in it. Okay, I took action. Okay, I took one step. Okay, I made a phone call. You know, I started with a list. All right, I'm going to just pray about this every day. That's a step, you know, and just keep your process right sized, you know, and then keep the unconditional love for yourself, which is that, hey, if I never get there, it doesn't fucking matter. What matters is that I love myself enough to try and enough to be gentle with me through healing the shame. And that's it. If I never arrive, I don't really care. Like, my happiness does not require that. I do want to hear, if you choose to share, like, what would be your recovery plan around this? What is a recovery plan? What are some decisions you can make and some actions you can implement that will get you off that hamster wheel? I just wanted to let everybody know, like, I drew this little graphic here. You know, this is our precious self inside. Here's our healthy shame boundary, and here's us radiating out, and here's other people mirroring and offering us feedback. And this is what we do in recovery as we find a new family to help us restore this healthy shame, you know, around us. The restoration to sanity for our healthy shame comes from other relationships and healthy people that are offering us feedback and saying, hey, I care. Hey, you matter. They're saying to us, you know, your story is valuable. They're saying, you're trustworthy. I believe you. They're saying, I need you. They're saying, I love you. You know, so these relationships that we build in recovery are so critical to us, you know, restoring that healthy shame boundary that teaches us not to offend others and not to allow offense to happen either. And, you know, rebuilding our right size muscle. And what I want to say is that for me and pretty much everybody I know in recovery, it's a messy process for us to rebuild boundaries and healthy shame. And we are each other's guinea pigs. You know, it can look really, really messy. So just because we think we figured out in our heads of like what's right and what's wrong and what's healthy and what's not healthy and what a good boundary looks like, we're practicing on each other, and we all have a lot of toxic shame triggers. So I just want to say that I've been through that a lot in the rooms, you know, and that, you know, it's just really important for us to give each other a break, to do our, you know, to do our best to understand that everybody's just as wounded as I am, and to try to have some tolerance for that, and to understand that triggers happen. You know, we need a t-shirt that says triggers happen. So anyway, thank you everybody for participating and joining me and listening to my story, and that's all I have. Thanks.